Okay. Is that working?
Yep.
Brilliant. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the annual meeting of Development Control B Committee taking place in the Council Chamber of City Hall, College Green, Bristol. Following the end of government legislation allowing the holding of remote decision-making meetings, this meeting is being held as a physical meeting with the councillors and officers attending in the Council Chamber whilst maintaining the required social distancing. The meeting is being webcast and members of the public who wish to view this meeting remotely can do so by clicking the appropriate link on the agenda papers on the Bristol City Council website. I believe it will also be available on YouTube for post-performance viewing. Members of the public who wish to address this committee under the public participation procedure must do so in person and are in attendance in the conference hall where they can see the proceedings on the monitor. When it is your turn to speak, you will be led through the council chamber and directed to a microphone to speak for 1 minute, and then you'll be led back to your seat in the conference hall. This will be strictly enforced to ensure all people wishing to do so and to speak are able to do so, and that all applications are properly determined. For those people watching on the webcast or on the monitor in the conference hall, although you'll see a number of different people on your screen during the course of the meeting, only myself and the other councillors will make the decision on each application. Members of the committee are asked to note the rules of debate and for voting set out at the beginning of the paperwork for the meeting and to follow these as required. Each planning application will follow the same process. First, we'll hear the public participation speakers, and then the case officers report, then questions from councillors, debate from councillors, and then finally any motions in making a decision. When moving a vote, would councillors please indicate that you wish to speak by raising your hands and wait until I ask for you to do so. Please clearly state what you're moving, particularly for the benefit of the public. The first vote for each application will be the officer's recommendation. If you're seconding a motion, please, again, for the benefit of the public, clearly indicate you wish to speak to do this and wait for me to call you. Following previous practice with remote meetings, during each vote for each planning application, I will call each councillor's name and ask them to confirm their vote, which will be either for, abstain or against. So it's all clear for everybody who's watching. Does anybody have any questions? Nope, great, we'll begin. I will switch around my many screens. Okay, so item 2 on the agenda is confirmation of chair for the 21-20 municipal year. The committee is asked to note my appointment as chair. Everybody in favour of that? And then item 3 is confirmation of the vice chair, which is Councillor Chris Windows for the year 21-22. Item 4 for noting the appointment of the councillors as per the agenda. Any issues on that? No. Okay. Committee. Oh.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Also, Councillor Pearce is substituting for Councillor Goodman this afternoon, and we'll sort of keep you posted on where we go with that.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. Okay. Terms of reference. The committee is requested to note terms of reference as agreed at full council. Any issues? Nope. Okay, so then date of item agenda 6, date of future meetings. It's proposed that we flip and alternate the meeting times between 6 p.m. and 2 p.m. for sort of sake of democratic inclusion for as many people as possible. Did I see your hand, Fabian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we discussed it in our group. We're quite happy with that, but we do want to make sure that the evening meetings are capped to 3 hours. So we'll obviously have to bear that in mind during the agenda conferences. It might mean that we have to allow the afternoon meetings to be a bit longer to compensate. But I think given people's working patterns, that would be a fair balance, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's quite reasonable. Any other comments on that? No. Okay, agreed. Brilliant. Item number 7, any apologies or substitutions?
Yes, Chair, we've got one apology from Guy Poultney and also Zoe Goodman. Steve Pearce is substituting for her.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Item agenda 8. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Brilliant. Okay. Agenda item 9, minutes of the previous meeting held on Thursday the 15th of April 2021. I was not present myself. Does anybody have any objections or anything to note with them?
Is the committee happy to approve these, the correct record? Yep.
Yep, great. Thank you very much. Actually, Jeremy, can you pass me a pen? I've only brought a pencil. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10, appeals. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. You will have received a list of the current appeals. I'm available to answer questions if I can. Otherwise, I'll take them away and get a response to you. Thank you, Chair.
Any questions or notes? No. Brilliant. We'll move on. Agenda item 11, enforcement.
Again, this is a list that will be circulated with your papers ahead of the meeting on the enforcement activity with the local planning authority. If you have any questions, then please do let us know and we can get responses to you on this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so now we'll come on to the public forum. And just to remind members of the public, we have 1 minute as a timer for this. Let's see, who do we have first? Switching between my various bits of...
I think the first speaker is James Galvin, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you much.
He's ready to speak.
Yeah. Shall I go?
Whenever you're ready, thank you.
Sorry, I want to say that Bristol prides itself on being an inclusive and diverse city, and this is the perfect opportunity to express that. The local care sector is facing new enormous challenges that we all need to step up and support for them to carry on delivering the services they provide in these challenging times of COVID-19. The residents of any care home should have basic human rights like everybody else and are as entitled to be part of any immediate community where they reside, in this instance, Glenview Care Home in Redland. Care homes must not be viewed as a stigma to our communities, but an absolute integrated part of our community. And with the ongoing rise in demands of our care homes, they should be accessible to all and offer a new template that caters to our current needs as a caring city. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we carry on, Jeremy, are speakers allowed to take off their mask whilst they're speaking?
Yes, they can, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Martin Frodor.
Thanks, Chair. I rarely make a personal judgment on ward applications. I want residents to have their say when that's needed. But there's been a succession of applications here, hence my presence. Residents waited about a year to have their say on a very similar 17-bed extension a year ago. And at one point, public statements were actually suspended for a month. It was that application went all the way to appeal. And at the same time, this modified application came forward, it was drawn up, and yet another proposal was followed, an 8-bed conversion of the same premises. If you've seen the pictures of ambulances, delivery lorries, hearses, waste trucks, and bad visitor parking from the 3 existing care home businesses, then you'll appreciate the problems that residents have where there is no parking management scheme in this area affected by adjacent RPZ and the Downs parking limits. So commuters, businesses, and visitors are not managed. There are also a great many concerns locally due to the impacts, including traffic, parking from staff, servicing, visitors and emergencies, plus the issue of noise, waste and nuisance. Finally, there's the cumulative impact of successive developments on the balance, inclusivity and community in this residential street. These were all 3 grounds given at the previous meeting that turned down the 17-bed extension. So please do listen to residents' concerns, consider the impacts of extra development, and look at the grounds cited by the committee last time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mark Willis.
Thank you, Chairman. My name is Mark Willis. I'm agent for Medicare Homes. Just following off from Councillor Fodor, he's raised the issue of servicing and congestion. You know that's the one reason for refusal in this case. At the recent appeal, the inspector was entirely happy with the mix, with the principle. The only thing he was unhappy about was that there was no servicing plan and there was no legal agreement. The legal agreement for the servicing plan and the servicing plan has been with officers since the 15th of April. It's not mentioned in the committee report at all. All we're asking you to do is to defer this decision so that you can take into account the service plan and the legal agreement. The service bays will work during the day. That will remove congestion during the day, and during the evenings and at weekends when the service bays are no longer required, those spaces will be available for parking. This is a win-win. This resolves the problems with the existing care homes and resolves the problem, the single reason for refusal in this case. And we need, members need the time to consider that proposal in detail. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Carlton Remain.
Hi, Chair. Hi, welcome. In this current time, we're facing challenges and issues including climate and COVID, Brexit, mental health and well-being. Our care sector is facing enormous new challenges and need all the support it can get in helping essential services to provide for the residents and their families. I reviewed the last planning committee meeting on YouTube and felt that I had to speak out in defence of the nursing home and its residents that provides a much needed service for dementia. A residential community is all about the sense of place and giving, a geographical area, and not limited to a few common attitudes and interests. A caring community needs to look at how they can work together in supporting care services. Today's care homes need to survive and thrive in meeting new demands of COVID-19, enable them to provide vital services for our elderly and most vulnerable in the community. Glenview should not be considered a stigma without its immediate community, and is an essential part of that community. Again, with the planning and homes that are going on within Glenview, I found that there was nothing that I viewed that impacted at all with parking. I know that when I looked at the last YouTube meeting, people talked about planning, they talked about parking, but if Glenview was actually turned into apartments, it would increase the parking rather than the staff that are actually going there. So I'll just sum up because it is only a minute. However, if the building was sold as flats and rented, this could increase the parking problem, which would make me believe that the objections are not to do with the parking issue, which is the objections are based on.
Thank you, Carlton.
Latest submission for work to be carried out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Julia Letzu, apologies if I've mangled your name.
So on behalf of more than 70 residents, which include NHS workers and MOD families, I am asking the committee to reject this application. This is virtually identical to the one submitted last year and should be rejected on exactly the same grounds, essentially road safety issues, over-concentration of nursing homes on one road, and increase of harmful conditions to residents. We are glad that planning recommends refusal on basis of road safety, which is a huge concern. We would like to stress the importance of including the other two reasons as well. They remain valid reason for refusal and would ask the committee to recognize these and the impact they have on residents. Both my mother and I work for the NHS, and we have to choose to travel to work by bus, as we know that when we come back after our 12 hours really exhausting shifts, we won't be able to park on our street. It takes about 10 to 20 minutes to actually find a parking spot. When I was pregnant, I had a problem with my midwife appointments due to the parking issues, as she couldn't come to see me on time because she couldn't find anywhere to park, which took quite a chunk of it off. To sum up, this applicant has a history of repeat applications and appeals. We ask you to help ensure this development does not go ahead by refusing it in the strongest terms possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Laura McEwen.
Good afternoon. I'm a mother to 3 children and I'm here to talk about road safety on Belvedere Road. I first met with our local councillors several years ago to discuss this issue, long before this application came to light. We have huge road safety issues on our road, and what followed the communication with them was a large community meeting to which we had police community support officers due to the fact that they are regularly called out onto our road to try and solve the traffic management issues. I have a catalogue of photos which we've been submitting to Bristol City Council for years to try and get them to stop and listen to our problems. We have 94 high dependency elderly patients living on a road of 21 houses. It is not just about visitors and staff to these homes. As well as that, we have doctors, therapists, waste disposal vehicles, food delivery, maintenance, and many ambulances. We cannot ask ambulances to leave our road. They block the road. It's a single lane road. So when they are there, no one can travel in or out of the road. This creates a lot of aggressive driving. We have large lorries reversing at high speed up the road, and all corners of the road are blocked with illegally parked cars. Bristol City Council is aware of this because they regularly ticket these cars, and it means that I cannot cross the road safely with my children because I cannot see round the bend. It is a melting pot of many bad situations relating to the fact that we've got the at the top of the road and the care homes too. There will be an accident on the road if this isn't addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maria O'Callaghan, please.
We ask you to please refuse this application on the grounds of overconcentration of nursing homes on one road. Belvedere Road contains 21 buildings, 5 of which have already been converted to nursing homes. These are not supported living units, but provide complex nursing care, similar to hospices. All of the dementia homes in Redland are on this road. If this development goes ahead, the population of the nursing homes will be 108, compared to an estimated residential population of 90. If this is not overconcentration, it's difficult to say what is. Our written statements show that this estimate is based on figures provided by Bristol City Council, which is the most reliable way to estimate the normal situation. This development would result in a reduction in housing units in an area otherwise ideal for young families, harming the mix and balance of the community and going against the tilted balance and against Bristol City Council's own planning policy. We ask the committee to refuse this application on the grounds of overconcentration. Thank you.
Thank you. Samantha Nant.
Good afternoon. I am a resident of Belvedere Road. Please don't allow the obvious red herring about service bays raised by Mr. Willis to distract you. Service bays, large or small, day or night, however managed, do not address the fundamental issue of the large volume of traffic and entirely insufficient space to accommodate the needs of the homes as they currently are, never mind with increased numbers. And Mr. Ellis's assertions are simply incorrect about them being able to alleviate any pressure. Residents planning and transport experts address this issue accurately and in detail, highlighting the numerous failings of the developer's parking study and overall proposal already. We don't see the need to see any further details to know that's unworkable. Furthermore, this matter was thoroughly addressed by the Secretary of State's inspector. If they don't believe it's safe and viable to add anything further to the street, I'm not sure we should be second-guessing them. I see no evidence that Mr. Willis's slightly revised proposal can magically alter that situation. Mr. Barry's support statements all refer to the need for dementia care. We're not NIMBYs. We probably appreciate more than most what's needed, given the near 100 dementia care patients already on our road. It's the Care Quality Commission's national recommendation that dementia homes be sited on the outskirts.
Can you bring your comments to a close, please?
Over 100 directly affected individuals are asking you to support the officer's recommendation and strengthen the reasons for this refusal, so we can put an end to this merry-go-round of vexatious applications.
Thank you. Kate Whitehead.
I am asking the committee to reject the application for 7 Belvedere Road. We are an MOD family, one of 6 on the road that occupy quarters. I speak as a forces family, one of several on the road, and in support of the civilian residents. I refer you to my statement and 32-page documents submitted detailing the level of disruption on the road immediately outside our home on Belvedere Road. Please look through it if you have an opportunity. In it are highway safety issues, antisocial behaviour, environmental health issues, parking and traffic disruption. This is not an exhaustive log by any means. This is to provide a small insight into the level of disruption we experience. This recorded at a time when the applicant was on his best behaviour due to applications and an appeal in progress. A representative of the Secretary of State upheld the recent refusal decision for the 17-bed care home. This is a 14-bed care home application. This application has a difference of 3 beds. Why are we here? Why are we wasting your time at council? We ask you to strongly and robustly refuse this application on all 3 grounds.
Thank you very much for everybody who came and made a statement. Now, before we move on to the officer presentation, Peter would like to clarify something for us.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to address the applicant's request for a deferral ahead of your consideration of the application. The reasons, as I understand it, for that deferral were to allow them to consider the mechanisms for delivering the lay-by. We think that it's worth, in the first instance, to consider the principle of whether a lay-by in this location or is acceptable. So my colleague Alex Horton will have a slide on this, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that ahead of the officer's presentation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for that, Peter. Officers, thank you very much.
Is that showing on screen?
No, it's not showing for us. We've just got the agenda. And those ones. It should be the 2. Okay, brilliant, thanks.
Thank you. Sorry. This is an application for a change of use of 3 flats to a 14-bed residential care home. The site is in Redland and just off the top of Redland Road. The site's on the outside edge of the Cottam North residence parking scheme and is also located in the Downs Conservation Area. This photo on screen now shows the existing care home in red with the adjacent 3 flats in the building known as 7 Belvedere Road on the right-hand side in red. And as you can see from this photo here, it's the frontage onto Belvedere Road. So you can see that there's a non-original entrance into the front elevation, which is access to the ground floor flat. And then also to the left, you can see the existing Meadow care home with the bin stores just on the left-hand side of that image there as well. It's quite a long and complicated history to this site, and a number of schemes have been before committee over the last few years. In 2018, there was a application approved by Development Control Committee to excavate the lower ground floor of the existing building and convert the building into 3 flats, and that was approved. Then last year, some members will note that there was an application for a similar scheme to the one that was before you today, but that was for a 17-bed extension to the care homes, which was refused by Development Control Committee. That was refused for the reasons on screen. So the proposed development would result in an unacceptable increase in car parking in the area and concerns about the highway impacts of that. Concerns about impacts on an overconcentration of residential institutions in the area. and concerns that that would also impact in terms of noise and disturbance and inadequate bin storage and cycle storage for members of staff. Has that changed? Sorry, I don't know what's... There we go. Sorry. So this previous scheme, as I say, is rather similar to the one that's before you today. So it was a 17-bed care home extension across 4 floors. So each of the bed spaces would benefit from an ensuite bathroom, and there would also be a ground floor lounge provided. Sorry, moving on to the appeal of this 2020 application. So that was appealed earlier on this year with a decision received just before the Development Control Committee in March. So hence why that scheme wasn't presented to that committee meeting and has been deferred to today. In conclusion, the inspector decided that the scheme would be unacceptable in terms of impacts on transport and highways. They didn't consider that there would be an unacceptable impact on the concentration and mix of the area, and they felt that there wasn't an unacceptable impact from noise and disturbance either. And you can see some of the conclusions from the inspector's decision there. So they've highlighted that the parking surveys that have been provided by the applicant, they represent a snapshot rather than necessarily an accurate picture of the situation experienced by residents at all times. He concluded that parking was absolutely at a premium in the area, and it did often result already in unsafe parking and conflict, which has been referenced by the residents, and that the increase in additional services and deliveries and the parking the parking bays that are proposed alongside that wouldn't be sufficient, mainly due to their multiple uses proposed, and also the fact that they would result in the loss of 4 car parking spaces on street. So just moving on to the current application. So there's several changes which you can see on screen here. So the main ones being a reduction in the number of bed spaces from 17 to 14, a new parking survey, and then a new smoking area for staff. And as I mentioned before, the proposal to include the 2 loading bays as per the previous application, as well as segregated bike and bin stores for members of staff and for the use of the extension. In terms of the existing floor plan, so at ground floor level, I'll cover these very quickly, but we've got the masonette across the lower ground floor and upper ground floor, and then flats 2 and 3 located at the first and second floor. Moving on to the proposed plans, so there's a lower ground floor lounge included as per the previous application, and each of the bedrooms again would benefit from an ensuite and have their own window. The main changes are at the upper floor levels, so as you can see on screen here and here. There would be an addition of some extra sort of communal space, so an extra lounge for those residents. And this is just showing the elevation, so largely the same as existing, there'd be sort of minor changes. And there would be a slight benefit to the appearance of the front elevation there with the reinstatement of the window, which I'll just circle around here. So that's currently a doorway, which is, as I say, non-original, so an alteration to the building. So that's considered to be a slight benefit in terms of design. In terms of the levels of public interest, so as you can see, quite a significant number of comments have been submitted, well over 200. and the application has also been referred to DC committee by Councillor Fodor. Moving on to the key issues. So on balance, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable with sufficient evidence provided by the applicant for demand for this type of dementia care home in the city. It is noted that there is obviously the housing delivery test, which requires us to apply the tilted balance. However, it's considered that there's sufficient evidence to warrant the loss of these flats and allow for the principle of the change of use. In terms of the concentration, this is something that's been quite difficult to assess because unfortunately our policy BCS8 doesn't define what the tipping point would be in terms of a harmful concentration. But we have referred back to the appeal decision from the inspector, which has said that they don't feel like there's a harmful perception of excessive care homes in the area when they've visited. There have been a number of statistics that have been sort of provided by residents, but unfortunately we're not able to sort of verify those. And unfortunately census data as well, it's nearly 10 years old now, so it doesn't necessarily consider the more recent changes that have happened in the area or the immediacy of some of the impacts that are happening actually on the street themselves. But as I say, the main thing to take away from this previous application is that the inspector concluded that there wouldn't be a harm to the mix and balance of the community, and the recommendation is consistent with that decision from the inspector. Moving on to parking, so there would be no parking provided on site. Both the applicant and local residents have undertaken parking surveys to assess whether there is sufficient parking locally. Both of the surveys that have been provided demonstrate that there's quite a considerable constraint experience within the vicinity of the site. And this is exacerbated by the fact that the site is just located outside of the residents' parking scheme. There is, however, just enough spaces in the applicant's parking survey to demonstrate that they would meet the demand associated with the extension. As I say, the way that we give these has been adjusted slightly from the previous application that we presented on the basis of the inspector's decision, which noted that the surveys were just snapshots, and the inspector placed more weight against the evidence from the neighbours in terms of the photos submitted and their logs of incidents, etc., and then the experiences of both the officers from Bristol City Council and then also the inspector on their site visit, which both indicate that the parking is already oversubscribed in the area. And whilst I say the parking demand associated with the development would be relatively low, with up to 3 spaces needed at peak, given the existing constraints, this is likely to worsen the existing conditions which are already causing issues in terms of highway safety. In terms of the variance between the current application, which is before you today, and the previously refused application, it's considered that the reduction in beds from 17 to 14 is not sufficiently different to the refused scheme, and it's concluded that the proposal would worsen an existing situation where on-street parking is at a premium. Just moving on to the request for deferral and also concerns about deliveries and servicing. So what I've put up on screen, which hopefully, sorry, I don't know why that's not changed, apologies. Yes, apologies for that. So up on screen, there is a sort of diagram showing the process for the proposed installation of these servicing bays. So the agent for the application has just mentioned that they think the application should be deferred because there's no reference to the unilateral undertaking, which would be required, or for the TRO, which would be required to install those bays. But what we're saying is effectively that we are in step one of the process, which is basically asking the question, are these bays acceptable in planning terms? We've concluded that they are not acceptable because of the loss of parking that they would cause. So there'd be a loss of 4 parking spaces in an already oversubscribed area, so it would likely worsen the existing situation again, whilst obviously having some slight benefits in terms of the deliveries and servicing. So effectively what we are saying is that the unilateral undertaking and the TRO, they are mechanisms to deliver something that we don't think is acceptable in planning terms. And I've just provided a few images which have been provided from residents as part of the previous case, just demonstrating some of the challenges that they are facing at the moment in terms of the deliveries and servicing. It's also worth noting the agent for the application did mention about sort of switching the TRO from a delivery and servicing bay to then replace them at night into a parking space again, so making them available. My understanding of the TRO process is that would be a permanent suspension of those parking bays, so therefore that wouldn't be possible. Matthew, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's correct. It has to be one or the other.
Yeah, thanks. And then just in terms of the inspector's sort of decision on that, they did also note that there was uncertainty around securing the traffic regulation order to make changes to the highway. However, as I've mentioned, that process is separate to the application and shouldn't form part of the members' consideration at the moment. It's purely whether the bays are acceptable in planning terms and so would solve the issues raised. And there's just another pack of images just showing some of the issues raised. So in conclusion, as we mentioned, the proposed development would, whilst having a relatively low parking demand, would worsen an existing situation and result in highway safety issues. Whilst the servicing bays would address some of the issues associated with servicing deliveries, their implementation would result in the loss of 4 parking spaces, and that would therefore worsen the congested conditions highlighted. Just finally touching on residential amenity, which was also one of the issues considered at appeal. So obviously there would be an increase of occupancy on site with the 14 bedrooms. However, given the largely residential nature of the care home, it's not considered that there would be a sufficient increase in noise and disturbance to warrant refusal. However, there would be a minor increase in the occupation overall. And this concurs with the decision of the inspector not to uphold the previous reason for refusal on the basis of noise and disturbance. So just in conclusion then, officers are recommending refusal on the basis that the proposed development would result in an increased demand for on-street car parking in an area which is already oversubscribed. And that would lead to congestion and conflict between road users and would result in a harm to highway safety. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, does anybody, Fabian, after you?
Thank you, Chair. Reference has been made to the proposed loading bays. Is there a diagram showing what they would look like? Available, please.
I can see if I can dig it out of the application file. But there's an indication. I've got a sort of a map of where they would be, but there's not sort of dimensions provided, but they would result in the loss of 4 parking spaces on the basis of the size that they would need to be, but I can dig them out.
Well, could you, okay, while you're doing that, if you can't dig them out, could you just sort of tell us where they would be? Would they be outside the main entrance, outside the new extension?
So there would be one immediately outside the existing care home, or sort of next to 7, 8 and 9 Belvedere Road. And then there would be one further down the road, sort of in close proximity to the other care home that's on the street as well.
Any other questions? Tony?
Yes, can I just ask, was there any reason given for the reduction from 17 to 14? Because if there was no over-concentration, I just wondered why there was a reduction in the first place.
Just purely a relatively minor change, just to try and reduce the impact in terms of demand for parking associated with that. So yeah, whilst there wasn't concerns about the changes by the inspector, obviously that previous scheme was refused on the basis of the concentration by committee. So they were seeking to address that comment from committee and also the demand for parking associated with that. But obviously the inspector didn't feel that there was harm to the concentration. So this application was submitted before the decision from the inspector.
Whilst everybody else is thinking, can I ask, so if there was an application in 18 to change it to 3 flats, what was the building before?
It was just one self-contained dwelling.
Okay, thank you. I'm also, something that's caught my eye in the statements was one from Kate Whitehead about antisocial behaviour from some of the staff, including urination in gardens. Is that something we can have noted and looked into on a general aside?
I think the applicant has tried to address some of the antisocial behaviour that's been described. I think by having a breakout space included in this application in the front garden, but obviously that is a noise and disturbance issue, but the specifics of what's been described obviously is a little bit harder to judge. And Peter, I don't know whether you want to come in there.
I mean, I was just going to mention the fact that the amendment had been made to the application to include that breakout area. Very difficult through the planning process to control people's behaviour as such, but we can certainly take that back to the applicant, and it's obviously it's noted in this meeting.
Thank you. And then the other thing I was actually wondered, with the amount of vehicles on the street generally, is anything, has the possibility of making the street one way or having like a ban on idling engines, for example, has that been something that's been looked into as part of this?
That doesn't form part of this application. I don't know whether that's something that's been considered by Highways Department. Matthew, I don't know whether that's something that you're aware of.
I'm not aware that we've specifically looked at either of those. I mean, one ways tend to sort of create problems elsewhere, and I think the bigger problem here is as much the parking, which is limited to what we can do. So I think, I mean, those are things we could look at, but I don't think they'd be the ideal. Certainly the one way doesn't seem like the right solution for this scheme.
Okay, thank you. Tony.
Yes, looking at one of the statements, it seems clear that of the residential homes on one side of the street, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 8, and number 9, and if this is approved, number 7 are all care homes, and that these are the only care homes in Redden Ward, so it's 100% of the concentration of care homes within Redden Ward are in this one street. Do we know if there was a specific reason why that has happened, or is it simply the idea that because there was one care home there, they've expanded as time has gone on?
Yeah, I'm not sure that this is something that's been designed. And in particular, I just think it's happens to be, I think both care homes are owned by the same company or the same person.
So personally, I struggle with this one because on one hand, we've got a very clearly aging population and we need quality dementia care for our elderly population within our city. And by deferring or rejecting this on the basis of parking, it just creates that same issue, but in a different area of our city, which is going to have the same problems regardless. We clearly have a problem in Bristol where we have too many cars on our street, and that's something that we all need to take responsibility for, not just people coming into our areas, but people that live in an area as well, which makes it feel very hard to reject it on the basis of parking, but I understand why residents want us to do so. Before we move to a vote, does anybody have anything else to add, or should we move to a vote?
Chair, you're supposed to move to a debate after you have the questions. You're supposed to have a debate.
My apologies. Let's move to a debate.
So that's when we can all start saying what we think.
Okay.
And that's
apologies.
how.
I'm a bit rusty. Andrew.
Yeah, I just want to ask about if we were to approve it on the basis of the service base, are they subject to they're obviously subject to a separate process in terms of getting approval on the TROs. How would that work alongside the consent if we were to consent to this?
We would include a condition on the consent that requires the installation of those servicing bays.
Before.
Yeah. And then obviously there would be the separate TRO process, which I think is also subject to public consultation as well.
Don?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I think residents have hit the nail on the head here, and this is a step too far in terms of the highways and highway safety. So I shall be voting with the officer's recommendation to refuse. Thank you.
Fabian?
Yeah, I have to agree with Don. It's one thing to say there's too many cars, but this is an area where, somebody could get killed if we allow the highway situation there where there's already a problem to actually get worse, or I think that would be irresponsible. And I think, the planning inspector made a very clear reason on highway safety grounds for refusing the appeal. And I think that the evidence from what we've had of this revised application is that situation hasn't changed. It therefore will still pose a issue on highway safety, and we should therefore refuse it on the grounds as suggested by the officer. So are we supporting the officer recommendation?
Leslie, are you nodding at me? No. Steve.
Firstly, a housekeeping issue. Is there a general noise in the chamber, or is it purely my tinnitus? No, thank God for that. Okay, there's been a number of what I would be tempted to call extraneous thoughts and ideas and potential suggestions for improvement of what is essentially somebody else's scheme. I don't think we should be looking to improve somebody else's scheme. I think that exceeds our remit here. I feel we have to determine the application that's before us, and the application that's before us isn't good enough. I would suggest from officers' reports on the traffic situation that it is unlikely ever to be good enough. And consequently, I will be voting no, not consequently on it never being good enough. On the question that it is not good enough now, I will be voting in accordance with the officer's recommendation, but I would observe that given the highway conditions in that vicinity, it would be unlikely that the applicant could affect such changes that would improve it sufficiently to make it. Am I making any sense at all?
Yeah. I'm nodding. Yep.
Thanks for those thanks for those very kind words, Chris. No, I don't approve this. I'll be voting with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Tony.
I just wanted to comment, although we do accept that there is a need and a demand for care homes in the city, I think whatever the legal definition is of overconcentration, there is clearly an overconcentration, in my view, of care homes on this one particular street, and it should not be down to one individual street to make up for the fact that there are enough care homes in the rest of the ward or the rest of the city. So I too would be voting with the officer's recommendation.
Leslie.
I think the air pollution is another problem.
Oh, can you
hear me now? Yes, I can hear myself. The air pollution is a real problem. It's not just, it must be very unpleasant for the patients and also for the residents of the road, because with all these vehicles waiting to take it, to be able to deliver something or waiting for a space, the air pollution is, I would have thought, was really bad. And I know we shouldn't say that they should be put to the edges of the city. It's much nicer for them, and let's face it, they can't. Unfortunately, they're not in a position to join in the community. So I think from that point of view, we've got to refuse this.
Oh, can you turn your mic off as well, please, Leslie? Oh. Brilliant, thank you very much. Andrew?
I share your reservations on turning it down on car parking alone, because it sort of sets a precedent that could probably be applied right across the city. But that's, you could argue that precedent's already been set. I can't see how we can approve, given that the changes are only minor compared to the previous decision, which was upheld at the appeal. I don't really see how I can vote any other way other than with the officers on this one.
Any other comments, or shall we move to a vote? Chris? Okay. Do I have a seconder to move the officer recommendation to refuse? Fabian, seconder. So I will roll call us, so that is clear for those viewing on the webcast who has voted in which way. So first, Councillor Donald Alexander, please.
Refuse. So sorry. So for the officer's recommendation to refuse.
That's good.
I apologise. Better having been chair of this committee or the previous committee.
It's been a while. It's hot. Okay, Councillor Leslie Alexander.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Fabian Beckles.
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Tony Dyer.
For the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Steve Pearce.
Caught me unaware there. There's a big move from B to P. In favour of the officer's recommendation.
Very good. Councillor Chris Winders.
In support of the officer's recommendation, and Councillor Pearce's, of course.
Brilliant. And then that just leaves me, which is also in favour of the councillor's officer's recommendation. Who are we? Where are we? Okay, thank you very much. So that has been rejected as per the officer's recommendation. So moving on to the next item. We don't have any public forum speakers for it, so would the preference be to crack on and get it done, or to have a quick comfort break? Crack on. Okay, let's crack on. Okay, in which case, officers, please. Sorry, I sprung that on you.
Apologies, hopefully this is loading.
It's
There we
quite
go.
warm in here today, it's okay.
Can everyone see that, hopefully? So this is an application which seeks full planning permission for the demolition of a former health centre and retail unit and the construction of a Part 3, Part 4-storey block with 36 affordable flats. Just before I begin the presentation, I'd just like to draw members' attention to the amendment sheet. There's just a correction on the number of parking spaces being proposed within this development. Unfortunately, the report refers to 8 parking spaces. That should actually be 14 car parking spaces or 13 with a disabled space provided. There's also several changes to the conditions just following discussions with the applicant. So there's some slight tweaks to the wording there just to make the conditions slightly easier to implement. So this site is located in Windmill Hill in South Bristol. It's located on the southern side of St John's Lane at the junction of Wedmore Vale. So you can see the two parts of the site there. So there's the former health centre with the car park area to the south and the retail unit on the right-hand side of the building there to the east. And again, this just shows another aerial view of the site. And this just shows the existing building, which is starting to look rather tired following the vacation of the site. So the doctor's surgery was vacated in 2018 when the Wedmore practice moved to the new Marksbury Road surgery around the corner, and the retail unit was vacated in 2019. And as I mentioned, there's a previous application which sought permission for 29 affordable dwellings on site, which was just for the health centre on its own. That was approved back in May 2020. Unfortunately, it did take a little bit of time to get the Section 106 agreement sorted, but the decision was issued for that permission in January 2021. So that is a material consideration in your decision-making process this afternoon. And this just shows what that previously approved scheme looked like on that site. So you can see that it fronts both St John's Lane and Wedmore Vale. And you can see just on the left-hand side, top left-hand side of the image there is a picture of the retail unit, which is also considered as part of this application. And this is said retail unit, which again is in a rather sort of poor state of repair, unfortunately. You can also see just in the foreground there's an existing Malago Greenway cycleway, which runs adjacent to the site. So in terms of the current proposal, so be a building fronting both Wedmore Vale and St John's Lane with 36 affordable apartments. Each of the sort of ground floor flats would benefit from amenity space at ground floor level. You can see the car park to the rear here with the 11 spaces here and the further 3 spaces just on this side of the car park here. You can see the flats at ground floor level, and also there's a main entrance lobby which is located centrally on the site. The floor plan's rather similar up at the upper levels. There's also sort of an urban living positive feature at the upper floor levels of a deck access. That means that all the flats that are proposed are dual aspect, and also there's balconies at the first and second floor level for those residents. And just finally, this shows the upper floor, which is a recessed 4th story. The units themselves would be a mixture of 1 and 2 bedrooms. And there'd also be cycle spaces provided on site within 2 different stores. This just shows the proposed elevation. So there'd be red brick construction, which is typical of the area, with a recessed standing seam metal 4th story, and that 4th story wouldn't be visible from the ground level. And this is just a 3D image showing the development. So as you can see on the left-hand side, there's the main change here, which is just that addition of a 3-story element adjacent to the existing previously approved elements on this side. In terms of levels of public interest, there's relatively sort of small amounts of comments. So 5 comments received in objection to the scheme, and 1 comment neutral in nature. The comments that were raised were just concerns around the level of parking proposed, and concerns about the impact that this might have on the local highway, and then also concerns raised about the scale and the massing of the proposed development. Moving on to the key issues and the assessment. So the principle of development is supported as the scheme would contribute towards the delivery of affordable housing. Obviously, the doctor's practice has been re-provided in new modern premises at the Marksbury Road development. The retail units considered to be not viable given the length of vacancy, and the betting shop is not considered to constitute an important service to the local community. All of the units would be affordable housing. However, it's worth noting that only 11 of these would be secured as affordable housing in perpetuity as part of the Section 106 agreement. However, that would comply with our policies of securing 30% affordable housing in this location. In terms of design, so the scheme is supported by our city design group. As I mentioned, the 4th floor that's provided is recessed and wouldn't be visible. Whilst the increase in height is above what's typically sort of found in the area, so sort of more suburban 2-story houses, there are a number of developments of 3 stories along St John's Lane, and we consider that to be consistent with both those schemes and also with the approach of urban intensification that's supported by the Urban Living SPD. Sorry, just a couple of more points on design. So yeah, the use of red brick would accord with the existing character of the area. And as I mentioned, benefits of providing dual aspect units and a welcoming entrance, again, in accordance with the Urban Living SPD. In terms of parking, so there would be 14 car parking spaces provided on site. That's considered sufficient by Transport Development Management, given that the car ownership generally for affordable housing is lower than typical demand, and that along Wedmore Vale and St John's Lane and St John's Crescent, there's sufficient parking identified. It's also worth noting that the actual car parking ratio per number of units has improved quite significantly from the previous application. So the approved scheme had 29 units and 8 car parking spaces. This one has an increase of 7 units to 36, but we've managed to increase the car parking up to 14, so nearly doubling the car parking available. In terms of residential amenity, so I've included a couple of shadowing diagrams on the screen there. This site benefits from being sort of on a northeasterly corner of the site, so any overshadowing is actually sort of experienced onto St John's Lane itself and doesn't extend over the road to the primary school. The element that's sort of additional to the previous consent is the same size and massing as the existing William Hill building. So there's no additional amenity impacts associated with the extended element of the scheme. And whilst there is a slight increase in overlooking to properties, This is consistent with our window-to-window separation distances. And then also there have been a couple of amendments to the scheme during the determination period. So we've managed to secure a removal of one of the terraces at fourth floor level, and we've included the applicant has included a number of privacy screens as well to manage overlooking. So in conclusion, we're recommending approval for this scheme, which is for 36 affordable apartments, subject to Section 106 agreement, so the contributions towards affordable housing to be secured in perpetuity, as well as a couple of contributions included on screen for transport improvements, so for a car club to reduce private car ownership and usage, and then also a travel plan also to reduce travel by private car. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Does anybody have a question? Pop your mic on, please, Leslie.
Thank you. Do we know why they decided to do the fourth floor or clad it in something different? Because if they're trying to hide it, which presumably they were a little bit, it stands out more than ever, I would have thought.
I don't have the answer to that, do you?
Sorry, could you say that again? I didn't quite catch it. Apologies.
Sorry. Why did they decide to clad the fourth floor in a different material than the rest? Because I would have thought it would make it stand out, not hide it.
So the recessed nature of the floor means that you wouldn't be able to see it from the ground floor level. However, if you were to see it from the distance, the sort of silvery grey colour that's provided at that upper floor level tends to blend in with the sky a little bit better. So rather than having a sort of more heavyweight red brick finish, it's that sort of slightly more ethereal, might be too strong a word, but slightly lighter weight appearance at that upper floor level, so to more blend in with the background of the sky as you would see it from that position.
Tony and then Fabian.
You said it's 100% affordable housing, but only 30% of that would be in perpetuity. Do you have a breakdown of how that affordable housing is broken down? Because obviously there's different definitions. So what percentage potentially would be social rent, for instance, affordable rent or shared ownership?
It's been agreed with our affordable housing team that this would be intermediate housing. So they've secured all 11 units as intermediate as part. The previous scheme was 9 units for intermediate, and they're proposing to do the same here.
Fabian.
Thanks. I wanted to ask: is the access to the car park open, or is it going to be gated? There's a second question I've got after that, depending on.
No, the access wouldn't be gated. There's no gate proposed.
Okay, my concern then is the rear seems, according to the images, the rear end covering is going to be basically grey render. That's going to be a magnet for graffiti and all kinds of vandalism, especially if there's open access and you can't actually get. So I think we should be looking either, have officers negotiate changing the back to brick, same as the front, or perhaps, or as well, consider gating the car park so that, prevent misuse and prevent any undesirable access. So that would be a bonus for the residents, I think.
I think feedback from our city design group was that they were keen to try and break down that elevation at the rear as well, because there's quite a significant a sort of blank wall there. So we've obviously got a condition attached to this permission for the submission of further samples. So that's something that we have control over there. So whether this sort of certain materials that obviously would be more difficult to sort of graffiti, then we would obviously seek to encourage those. But yeah, unfortunately with the gated access, I think that was one of the requirements for the applicant, and there were challenges in terms of the highway access there, so a gate wasn't feasible for them.
Have we pinned them down on the planting in the car park?
So there's another condition which is attached to the proposed list of conditions for a landscaping strategy and landscaping plans to be provided. They have shown indicative areas where there would be landscaping, so there would be landscaping along the border of the car park, a small triangular area as well within the car park itself, and then along the frontage of St John's Lane. I think you saw in the images at the moment, unfortunately, it looks in a pretty sorry state with that large silver palisade fence, so that's considered to be quite a positive for the area in terms of enhancing that frontage onto St John's Lane.
Fabulous, thank you. Any other questions, Andrew?
I think you've kind of partly mentioned this because you've talked about the number of affordable units in perpetuity going up from 9 to 11, but can you say how the Section 106 proposals differ from the previously agreed scheme?
So the intention is to keep them the same in terms of the mix. So it would be they would go from 9 intermediate affordable housing to 11 intermediate. So they would remain the same mix as previous.
And on the car club, the donation towards the £10,000 contribution towards car club. Given that there's been I used to be a member of a car club, and the number of spaces or the number of occupied spaces diminished over the years I was a member and has since continued to diminish. Forgive the pun, but how much mileage is there in the provision of car club spaces in the area?
So yeah, I think the reason we've asked for a contribution is because there wasn't a sort of feasible option for a car club space immediately outside the site. I think partly because of the Malago Greenway cycle route. So the intention is to use a contribution to provide it elsewhere, but within the vicinity of the site. So obviously that would be a benefit for the wider community as well if they were to sign up for the car club. But yeah, I think the intention is that would be pulled from other developments in the area and contribute towards a car club space in and around sort of the St John's Lane area.
Is it a specific car club or just a general car club?
I think there's a sort of condition where they have to demonstrate that the developer has signed up with a particular car club. Matthew, I don't know whether you've got any further information on that, but yeah, it's usually the applicant would approach a particular car club to provide it, and they would potentially get bids from multiple companies for all that.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there are a number of car club providers. So, I mean, normally we look for to go to the market. There's sort of Zipcar and Enterprise and Co-Wheels, and we do think it's a good solution where car parking is limited. So it could be any of those. It depends who wants to provide it. But I mean, there is quite a lot of competition in Bristol.
Great. Yeah, I love a car club. Right. Any other questions, or shall we move to a debate? Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to satisfy myself. I think you've answered my concerns from your presentation where you said that a number of changes had been made during the determination period. My only concern, and isn't really addressed by this, has already been determined at the prior application, was the impact of the fourth story on the adjacent semis to the south of the site. There's some screening been added at that location and further recessing of the fourth floor. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's correct. So to the south of the site, that fourth floor is pulled away from the southern elevation of the building. So actually, in terms of overshadowing as well, given that those buildings are to the south, the orientation of the sun.
There's no solar impact, is there?
Yeah, again, it's been assessed in terms of overbearing and the sufficient distance between the buildings there.
That was my only concern. Thank you.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, let's move to a debate. Thank you. Who is our first debater? Anyone?
Are we debating? Or
We are debating. Oh, and Steve, can you make sure you lean into the mic as well, because you're not being picked up.
Sorry, yes.
So we are indeed debating. Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that normally if I see a development as 100% affordable housing, I'm slightly overjoyed. However, at the same time, there are different meanings to that term affordable housing, and it does seem as if we're missing some social rent housing here. That is a shame, but I don't think it's enough for me to refuse or to vote to defer the application. But I do think we need to be aware of that. Sometimes we do seem to be getting affordable housing, which isn't necessarily affordable for a large proportion of our population.
Steve, thank you, Tony.
If we're taking the officer's recommendation as a proposal, I'm happy to second it. And if we're not taking the officer recommendation as a proposal, I'm prepared to propose that we accept.
I don't know whether we need a bit more debate first. I mean, yeah, I'm quite happy with what the officers with the design and the proposals. It seems, given the previous scheme was approved anyway, and getting rid of a derelict site, expanding the scheme to clear a derelict site is an improvement, and we get more parking. And I think I rather like the modern design. Apart from my concern about the facades at the back, I do rather like the design. It's and it'll blend in. So yeah, I'm happy to support the officer's recommendation. So yeah, then no one else has got anything else they want to say. Let's go for it. Go to the vote.
So does anybody else have anything to say, or are we happy to move to a vote? Okay, well, we'll move. Oh. Yep, great. Okay, we shall move to a vote. I'm going to bring up my roll call again before I forget who everybody is.
So just to clarify, Steve Pearce is moving the vote?
Steve Pearce is moving the vote, and I believe Fabian is seconding it.
Correct.
Yep. Okay, so the motion is to move the officer recommendation, which is to grant it. And so first we have Councillor Don Alexander.
For.
My laptop's being slow a second. There we go. Councillor Leslie Alexander. For. Councillor Fabian Beckles.
For.
Councillor Andrew Brown.
For.
Councillor Tony Dyer.
For.
I see you're ready for it. Councillor Steve Pearce.
Well, it had better be 4.
And Councillor Chris Windows.
4.
Fabulous. And also a 4 from me. So that is granted. And thank you very much. Hold on. I'm trying to find the right bit of my agenda.
I think the
now
final item is just the date of the next meeting, Chair.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, so the date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 21st of July at 6 p.m. at a breakneck speed of 3 hours, just for Fabian. Thank you.